Manx Radio Podcasts, powered by Shaw.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Hello and welcome to this week's Talking Heads podcast, looking back at some of the topics in the news that have grabbed your interest. This week, public sector pension reform, the promenade scheme, school buses, and the announcement of a new promoter for the TT are some of the topics that you've been getting in touch to talk about. Let's take a look back at some of your opinions. Here's Stu Peters.
The big question at the moment, are the latest proposals to reform public sector pensions fair? Scheme members will have to pay an extra 2.5% into their pensions and expect less back when they retire. The proposals for the government unified scheme have been accepted by most of the unions. A report on the state of public sector pensions and the plan to reform them has been put together by the Public Sector Pensions Authority and is due to go before Tynwald next month. The overarching message is that workers in the public sector will have to contribute more to their pensions for longer, for less in return when they retire. So, public sector pensions, it's been on the tip of everybody's tongue over the last 12 months or so on this programme. It seems to be the thing that concerns more people than anything else, and it seems like now government has got some sort of a handle on it. Do you think they've got a good handle on it? Or do you think that their plan is flawed? Stu, the MHKs are quick to blame the workers, but it's only been the last 5 years that they've contributed to their own pensions, and John Shimmin, for one, with 20 years as an MHK, will get about 50% of his final pay as a pension and 3.5 times his salary as a lump sum. Also, if they're below retirement age and stand again but are defeated, they get 6 months' pay as a golden handshake, says Jimmy. I'm not quite sure if all your figures are right there, Jimmy. No reason to question them at this point, though. Well, yeah, but the problem is that we've all allowed it to happen. I've said on the programme in the past that an awful lot of these things have happened because there was plenty of money in the system and the politicians could always buy their way out of trouble. But we've also fallen for that, and because there was plenty of money in the system, we weren't that bothered about how they were spending it, and the fact that they've chosen to spend it in these ways is kind of our fault as well, I think. It's not just the golden pensions and lump sum that public service get on retirement, they also get the state pension on top. As someone who works in the private sector, I'd love to pay what's being asked if I was guaranteed the same security when retired. Public service workers have to wake up and smell the coffee. The majority of taxpayers can't continue to fund the public sector pensions. Maybe this is why John Shimmin's jumping ship before the reforms come in to save his golden nuggets, says Pat. Bit unfair, but OK. Just a clarification here on Tynwald members' pensions. Apparently they worked out at around 2.5% for each year based on final basic salary with an uplift for departmental membership or holding ministerial office. Members don't qualify to claim until the age of 60 unless they take a reduced sum. So that's the official word on Tynwald members' pensions. More of your comments. When are the government going to repay the 100+ million that they borrowed out of the state pension fund to pay for the new hospital? Or has it been paid into the public sector fund through the back door, wink wink? I've got absolutely no idea about that. I've always looked at that as just an accountancy nicety rather than anything else. You know, which pot government money is in is fairly unimportant, I would have thought. I don't know. Hey boy, not much being said about those in receipt of an obscenely large pension back working in government. Police, teachers, chief execs, failed MHKs, directors. That situation is shambolic, according to Frank. OK. Stu, what makes public sector workers think they're entitled to a massive handout when they only pay a pittance in? Unions as well as bankers are destroying this island. Let there be a mass exodus and get new blood in on new terms. We in the private sector pay their wages, so let them come and join the real world and see how hard it is, says Ian. Well, yeah, but the trouble with that, Ian, is that we need people paying into the scheme to pay for the current liabilities. There isn't a pot of money that is being used to pay public sector pensions. What's being paid out this week is what's being taken in this week. So if you reduce the number of people paying in or the amount, then it's going to have a real negative impact on things. It's typical that the people who created this mess will walk away into retirement or are already in retirement, blissfully unaffected by change, spending their lovely pension pot. How fair is that? Make the younger generation work till they drop. Mr. Shimmin is all right. His pension's unaffected, says Cliffy. OK. Bob Cawley says that the employee should pay more towards the pensions, but feels that there should be no cap on the amount that's paid into the scheme from the employee side of things. And if someone wished to pay in larger contributions and receive a more generous projected benefit at the end of the scheme, they should be encouraged to do so. Okay. Can someone please tell us why the Hymans-Roberts report on proposals for pension reforms in the public sector that were conducted 4 years ago failed, costing us the taxpayers millions? It basically didn't work, and here we are again trying to fix it, says Peter. Very good point, Peter. Yeah, can we get a rebate on that maybe? Taxpayer must not be robbed to pay the public sector shortfall, says Doug. Mrs Moffat needs to take a back seat and face reality. What happened to solidarity? Let's have a system that works for all and not just a few. Too many of her union members have been taking the mick for most of the working lives. Government should do a survey to see how many paid sick days are taken in the public sector compared to those in the private sector. I think that they are aware of that, and I think that those numbers are coming down. I remember seeing a thing a few months ago about that. What a load of spin from the government pensions bloke. Employer, rest of us will be having to pay 20% of government employees' salaries into their pension fund. So somebody on $52,000 a year will get 200 quid a week put into their fund. It's a total disgrace, says Steve. OK, I mean, just a couple of thoughts that I had about this when I was at the presentation on Friday about this, is that a lot of this is predicated on future growth in the economy. Now, if you or I go to the bank manager for a loan to buy a new car, and he says, yeah, you can't afford it, and we say, yeah, but I reckon that I'll probably be making more money next year and the year after, he'll laugh you out the bank. You can only borrow money based on what you've got, not on what you might get, of which there's no guarantee. So that worries me a little bit. And the other thing is that, obviously people who are in the schemes are going to have to pay more and get less out. I understand that. But also, this is all predicated very much on economic growth. And it looks as though the government is saying, well, 25% of future economic growth is going to go towards paying the shortfall in the public sector pensions. Problem with that for me is that growth is generated by the private sector. It's consumed by the public sector, but growth is generated by the private sector. So it seems very much that, the money that the private sector is making is going to be spent on the public sector. That doesn't seem terribly fair. And also it's going to be spent on pensions and things that are unaffordable rather than on things that everybody says we need, things like roads and all the rest of it. So I don't know whether or not that's right. Now, what I will say is that John Shimmin made a very good point at the presentation the other day where he said that, this is a situation that has been brewing for probably 40 years, and it's probably going to take that amount of time to get back on top of it. That seems fair enough. But whether or not it's all going the right way, I really don't know. Let's go to the lines. We've got Ken on. Hello, Ken.
Oh, afternoon to you. Oh, what a mess. First of all, if the MHKs would pay to, get that out of their hat, if they actually paid, they couldn't be accused of, not paying.
Well, they are doing now.
Well, yes, I know, but, again, it's the government have broken their promises. So that's why probably, particularly Prospect, don't trust them. I wouldn't trust them. I've been on about this subject before. 10 years ago it was raised that the pension was going to something had to be done.
Yeah.
But they just ignored it, government. And, yes, people get lump sums over 100,000. And the other thing about it is, instead of having to retire after 40 years, you can work to 45, so you're blocking jobs for younger people coming into the civil service.
Yes.
And the other thing I want to say is, when they say the majority of unions have agreed to it, I wonder if one of them could come on and say why they have agreed to it. Why is it so good for them? Why have they agreed to it? Or they just say, well, something's got to be done, so we'll let our members be worse off.
I think the feeling that I get is that everybody realises that there isn't an easy solution to any of this. And it's all very easy saying, we ought to just cut the benefits that these people in the public sector get. I mean, that wouldn't be fair. And I know that there's concern about there are a lot of people that are having very, very fine retirements at the taxpayers' expense, but that was always the scheme. So, in many ways, it's our own fault for allowing that to develop, isn't it?
In theory, of course, because because civil servants got a good pension from the government, their pay was, that was the first thing when pay negotiations. Oh, of course, you've got to remember you get a good government-paid pension.
That used to be the situation, yes.
That used to be the stick they used to beat you over the head with.
It used to be the situation that the salary wasn't very good, but the perks were good, so the pension and all the rest of it was pretty good. Now, I believe it's turned the other way around, so that the public sector pay is actually better than the private sector, and they've still got all the perks.
You're going back to, a few years ago when they let me work longer than 40 years. I thought, what's that about? Why is that?
Yes.
But basically, then they gave us pay rise to lower pay to take, because if you didn't earn enough, you didn't pay the extra percentage.
Right.
But they actually increased the pay rise. They gave the lower grades slightly higher pay rise. Oh, and that took them £1 above, £2 above the limit. They had to pay them back.
Gotcha.
So I'll be interested to see why some of the unions, police maybe, who always had better pensions.
Yes.
Supposedly.
Yeah, but they also paid an awful lot more in, the police and the fire service, for example.
It'll be interesting to see why, they've agreed to it, if anybody can come on or...
All right, well, there's an invitation, so if any of the unions that have agreed in principle to this want to come in on the programme and chat about it, then by all means do. Let's go to line 2. We've got Ian on. Hello, Ian.
Hi there.
Yes.
I'd just like to make a couple of points which I've not heard made before.
Okay.
They may have been. I've not listened to all the programmes. Quite simply, I think there's a perception that the public sector pension fund has run out because the people in the schemes didn't pay enough money in.
Yeah.
That's not actually the case. The public sector pension fund was a fund created, I think in the 90s, probably at the time of David Cannon, or even later than that, to hold funds where people moving to the Isle of Man to work in the public sector, whether that was the hospital or civil service, teachers, whatever, opted to transfer their funds, their existing pension earned in the UK, into the Isle of Man.
Yes.
At which point, after making that election, funds were nominally transferred at least into the public sector pension fund. But most of the money, of course, should have come from the earnings of the people and the employer contribution. Now, I was a teacher for 30-odd years on the island, and in that time, I started off paying a personal contribution of 7%. I finished up paying a personal contribution of nearly 14%, partly because I came in late, so I needed to buy a couple of past years, and that was how it was done. Now, when I was paying 7%, the government was supposed to be paying 13% as the employer's contribution.
Yes.
That was part, if you like, of the whole remuneration package, exactly the same as happened in the UK. And I know for a fact that the public sector unions had been trying to get the UK government, and as a mirror scheme per se, the Manx government, to actually have a genuine fund. There never was a genuine fund.
No.
All the employees' contributions were taken off the employee and they went into the general revenue account.
Yes.
The employer's contribution, the government in this case, or its boards, police, fire, ambulance, whatever, that money was treated as general revenue. So if during the period of population expansion from the 70s to 2000, we had many more teachers, firemen, nurses, doctors, civil servants working, then we had a greatly increased level of income, general revenue,
yes,
which the government either spent or, of course, has ended up in the reserves.
Yes.
Accumulated particularly from the 90s onwards. Now, if that money is in the reserves, it should be an actuarial calculation to transfer that money from the reserves to the public pension fund, public sector pension fund. If we did that, then the general public would get a true idea of what money should be in that fund if government hadn't just treated it as revenue.
I see. Right. Okay. Yeah. Very good point.
So, when the taxpayers having to subsidise all these retired people who didn't pay any contributions or anything, that's absolutely not true. It was part of their conditions of service and remuneration.
Yes,
the fact that government nominally put the money in the books into the salaries and then took it out as revenue at the end seems to have escaped a lot of people's notice.
Right. Well, thank you for drawing our attention to that. Some interesting points there, Ian. Let's have a look at some more text. I share Angela Moffat's outrage at the government, but what's a solution, says David H. I think that's the problem with this, isn't it? I don't think that anybody, even the government, think that this is a perfect answer to the problem, but it's the least bad solution, maybe. I don't know what the answer is to it at all. Government pensions. I didn't work for government, but had to buy an annuity. My monthly pension's rubbish. My husband's on a government pension, not huge, but much better than mine. He paid in more than 30 years. Government employees are better protected than private sector. Think before you reject this deal, says Jane. Angela Moffat is in cloud cuckoo land, land of rhetoric with no solutions. There's no choice other than drastic action, says somebody else. Does Ms Moffat honestly believe that the private sector can continue to subsidise this bankrupt pension fund? Welcome to the financial reality of pension funding, which we in the private sector had to accept several years ago.
Men's Radio.
The Department of Infrastructure has drawn up proposals to shake up the government's passenger vehicle fleet. It would mean vehicles which have been bought at a number of schools through a combination of fundraisers, parent associations and donations could be taken off individual schools and placed into the Infrastructure Department's fleet. It's believed the move could save the department around £500,000 annually. However, the department insists the school will have absolute freedom of choice and has made it clear that any minibus provided by a charity or owned by a school can stay in school ownership so long as they operate and maintain it. The department says some schools use buses so intensively they'll still need a vehicle effectively full-time. Others will be asked to allow others to use it as and when they need to. What do we think about it? Let's go to the lines and talk to Vivian. Hello, Vivian.
Hello, Stu.
Yes, what's your thought on this?
Well, I'm a grandparent now, but say over the years, parents have raised thousands and thousands of pounds for schools for all sorts of things.
Yeah.
And they raised the money for minibuses so that the teachers could take the children out on projects when it was required, not when they had the money to be able to hire a minibus or hire a coach.
Yes.
And it was for convenience. And it means the children get more outside education.
Which on the face of it is a good idea, but to Jane's point earlier on, she says a lot of these things just sit around and do nothing and that you can't get a full class on one anyway, so what's the point?
But even so, I still disagree with the lady because I think that if the schools can afford to have them and run them, let them have them. They are nothing to do with government when they've been bought by the parents.
OK, well, that is one of the options, of course.
Yes, but I still worry that if they take those away, what else are they going to take away that the parents have bought for the schools?
Yes.
Because they do. Parents spend a lot of time raising money and they raise a great deal of money for these schools.
Sure.
And I'm quite annoyed about it.
Oh, right, OK.
Even think about it. I think it's terrible.
All right, fair dues. Thanks for your call, Vivian. Some more text. What happens if all the schools sell the buses, says one of our contributors. I'm guessing that that's one of the battle plans that the DOI have probably strategically planned around, that is maybe an eventuality where all the schools sell all the buses and keep the money instead. So I'm guessing that they are reasonably confident that they can handle the strain, if that's the case, from their own fleet. Why have these minibuses been allowed to sit there for years and being paid and maintained by the taxpayer? Well, not all of them are. Just proves this wanton waste by this and previous Isle of Man governments. Annoying, as we the taxpayers are footing this waste for years. OK. Bob says, if a school opts to maintain control of their minibus, what are the extra costs to the school of government passing back the cost of insurance and relevant licensing? Not small, I imagine. There was an advert a month ago for a new post of coordinator for school minibuses, but this isn't on the website anymore. Well, maybe they found the person. Nor the school time minibus driver advert either. So they only give notice over the school holidays when everybody's scattered. Where's the consultation that our government claims it has with interested parties? That's a very good point. It does seem a fairly quick timescale, this. At QEG School ask QEG School about their new minibus handed over in January with the help of the commissioners and Manx Lottery. Okie dokie, thank you very much, Bob. And what else? Stu, having donated several £1,000s for a school minibus a few years ago, I'm not best happy over recent events. If said bus goes into a pool for any school use or other department use, I for one will pursue court action for obtaining money by deception. Thanks from Neil. OK, well, it wouldn't be... I mean, I suppose you'd have to sort of go after the school if you were going to take legal action. It's not their fault, so I don't know whether or not that would be successful or beneficial, to be honest, Neil. But I take your point. I can understand why people would be particularly miffed by this, especially if they've spent a lot of their own time raising money to buy one of these for a school. And then find that effectively it's being got rid of and the money used for something else, which is one of the options. The company tasked with promoting and growing the TT was announced yesterday. Vision 9 will take over from next year, subject to Tynwald approval next month. The company is London-based, but will open an office here to do its work on the TT, which it's been involved with previously in terms of commercial deals. In a moment, we'll be talking to the Department of Economic Development member with a special responsibility for motorsport, David Cretney MLC, about what this will mean for the future of the festival and the reaction to the announcement. To discuss the announcement further, I'm joined in the studio by former Minister of Fun and now MLC David Cretney, the Department of Economic Development member with special responsibility for motorsport. David Cretney, good afternoon and welcome back to the programme.
Good afternoon, nice to be here.
A regular guest. Now, is this a case of government is so keen to try and save money left, right and centre that you're flogging off the family silverware to try and make a few quid?
Well, if I can correct that one to start with, I think I heard when they were coming in that you suggested they were taking over from... They're not taking over, they're becoming a partner. It's not privatisation. I was trying to address that last night with people. It's a new partner to go alongside the other partners that we have to take forward the events. Been very successful in the last few years. You're right, money is certainly part of it. They're going to make a significant contribution to government, but at the same time, Treasury is not over keen in making new money available when we see what, for example, the health services and their overspend. We've got to look at new ways of doing things, and the minister there referred back to this being said in the scope of government document in 2006.
All right. I mean, we often talk about the TT as the premier event that the Isle of Man puts on every year. I mean, it really is the jewel in the crown for us, isn't it, as far as tourism is concerned, as far as national reputation is concerned and all the rest of it. So is there not a worry that it's going to be diluted by having outsiders come in and do it?
No, quite the reverse, really. I mean, I wouldn't be sat here if I wasn't a supporter of this. And I was at first cautious, but I have to say that I do believe that having fresh eyes who are experienced in events promotion, who have been involved previously in terms of bringing Monster as a sponsor to the Isle of Man. They were involved then, I think, 5 years ago. So they already run events which are very successful, and they'll be working with there are 3 members of the motorsports team currently working within economic development who will have the option to move to this new organisation. But this organisation have been involved in lots of events and will take it, in my opinion, to the next level. And for me, that's not just about visitors, but also about locals who are going to have a great time. It's going to be an even better party.
Well, you say that they've got lots of experience of events, but I've had a look at their website, and most of the events are things like pop festivals and commercial events as such. It doesn't seem that they've got, apart from, you say, Monster Energy, their involvement with that, it doesn't seem that they've got much involvement with motorsport. So, would we not have been better with somebody like Bernie Eccleston or Dorner or whoever else is experienced at that kind of thing?
Yeah, I'm not sure about Bernie Eccleston. However, what I would say is that the various partners have various roles to do, and their role will be marketing and promotion. In terms of running the races, ACU events continue to do that. The government continues to have an involvement, so it's a partnership arrangement where we play to our strengths, and their strength is certainly about building in new, exciting things for people to do when they come here.
So is that what it's going to mainly concern? Not so much with the races, but the peripheral events around the races?
Absolutely. The races are nothing to do. They will not be running the races in any way. The races will continue to be run by ACU events. And obviously, the other thing is there's going to be a team with 2 members from Vision 9, 2 members representing the Department of Economic Development, an independent chairman, to talk through things throughout the year. So it's nothing. It's their particular expertise is something which I believe will only enhance the event. That's why I'm sat here. Otherwise, I wouldn't be.
Is this something that went out for tender?
It is.
And how many people actually tendered for the job?
Well, I can't recall exactly how many, but there were 2 on the short list who were fully interviewed by officers from the Treasury, from the Department of Economic Development, and this was the preferred bidder. I had hoped that there might be a consortium of Isle of Man businesses get together. In fact, I did have conversations with people who were suggesting that might happen. Didn't happen, and so we are where we are. And I'm not sorry about that, because these people are very good. But it would have been nice to see if a Manx team could have got involved.
Also, if approved by Tynwald next month, this is going to be a 10-year contract. For a new start firm, effectively, which is what they are in this role, that seems to be an awful long time. I mean, if it doesn't work out in the first couple of years, you've got no get-out, have you, if it's a 10-year contract?
I think there are clauses in terms of get-out, if necessary. I don't anticipate for one moment that will be the case, because what they bring into the party is stuff that they're experienced over 20 years in, so it's nothing new to them in terms of the exciting add-ons, as you describe, to the event.
All right, and is this a case of sweating the existing assets, or is it a case of trying to get more people over for the TT?
Yes, definitely, a bit of both. Clearly those people who come to Isle of Man, a bit like me, long-term fans. My involvement with the TT goes back to when I was a little boy. And so there is an age profile issue, not only in terms of visitors, but also in terms of marshals and things. And we need to do stuff about that. But latterly, in the last few years, when the event has become much more relevant, there have been a number of younger riders, top riders from top events, and also younger people coming along to experience it. And I would like to see us grow that part of it, and also what they're saying is, in terms of the family market, because it really is a kind of a male-dominated. If you're interested in the races, it's a male-dominated activity generally. So they're going to do other things, so people will be encouraged to bring their families along as well.
But that begs the question then, because whenever we talk about events on the Isle of Man, people always get onto the programme and say, people can't afford to come here. The steam packet fares are too expensive. There aren't enough boats, there aren't enough flights, and they're too expensive as well. How do we address that? It's all very well having a fantastic event. If people can't afford to get here...
Well, there are discussions going on presently with the steam packet, with the Department of Infrastructure, in relation to whether they carry on in the role they currently have. But what I would say is, people asked me about this last night. I was online talking to various people, and they asked me about, well, what about people not being able to get here? Aren't all the boats full? That isn't the case. The advice we have from the steam packet company is that 85% of the sailings have availability. However, most people want to come from the Saturday race day over the main weekend, and I think what will happen is in the future is, and nothing in the short term, but in the longer term, they'll look to see if they can balance out those peaks so that it's more manageable for hotels, more manageable for capacity constraint.
Quite often in business, you find that the marketing department starts to run the place, and the tail wags the dog. The people who actually do the job are often sidelines, and the marketing people decide what needs to be done. Is that a risk that we're taking here? I mean, you say that ACU events will continue to run the event as such, but if these people come along and say, well, actually, can we not move that race here, and can we not do that instead?
No, it's been made absolutely clear that that is not within their remit. The remit in terms of the racing remains with the ACU events. Their remit is to do everything else that goes alongside it, and to get new sponsorship throughout the year, to engage electronically with the audiences around the world in a very professional way, and just they have ambitious targets to grow the event, provide more resources to Alaman in terms of financial contribution, and we should welcome that.
So, that raises an interesting point. You say they've got targets. Have they got sort of key performance indicators where we'll be able to measure whether or not they're doing a good job for us?
They certainly have. There are a range of key performance indicators which will be tested with the organisation as things progress. And what I would say is, and this is said yesterday in various interviews, that people, year one, 2017, won't notice any different. This is a slow burn. This is something that's going to happen over the next several years, and then there's investment already ready to come into the event, and as I say, it's something I very much welcome.
It's often said by people, and it's a stereotype and a tired one at that, that the Manx people don't like change. It's very true. The Manx TT fans particularly don't like change. So are we in danger of ending up with more spectator areas where people have got to pay to watch the races, or any of those things?
Yeah, what was made clear by the organisation is that there are areas in Nobles Park now which are free for spectators. They get close to the stars, much closer than you with Formula One or the British Superbikes or any other sporting event which involves motorsport. They get right close, and that's going to remain free of charge. However, they will put other additional things on, and it may be that people will have to pay if they choose to use those activities, but the things that are free now will remain free. And that also goes for sitting on the hedges. There may well be they'll increase the number of fan zones, and it may well be that they'll have charges for those. However, this is 37 3/4 miles, which will continue to provide whatever you want to do.
What do we think about that? David Cretney's here, MLC, and member with responsibility for motorsport within the DED, and happy to take your questions. First one comes from Peter. Hello, Peter.
Hello, Stu. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Dave.
Hi, Peter.
Yep, sorry he's here.
My question is to do with this TT, this new organisation idea. But may I ask you, Dave, I did ask you about country and western music being up and down the rest, all of Britain bar the Isle of Man. I didn't get any feedback, sorry, from you.
That's a bit off topic.
Yes,
you did, and I said I would raise it at...
I'll get back into topic if Dave can just answer quickly.
All right.
Of course. Yes, you did raise that with me, Pete, and as I promised, I've raised that with the Villa Marina management, and they're looking to see if we can do something to improve that situation.
Right, thank you. Now, this here, you said partnership, Dave, yes?
I did, yeah.
You mean tourism, the government, etc., etc.
Yes, that's right, yes.
To me means cost, money for the ratepayer, taxpayer, everybody.
Well, that's not the case. What will be happening is there'll be, instead of the cost falling on the taxpayer to the extent it does now, there'll be a significant input to the Isle of Man Exchequer as a result of this arrangement. At the moment, it costs £2.3 million per year for the Department of Economic Development to put on the event, and we'll be looking to save that money, and the more successful they are, the more money that will come into the Isle of Man Exchequer. So it's not going to be an increased cost in any way.
Well, does that mean you will look after marshals far better than the government as such, the organisers, ACU and everybody else who's making nice profits out of this?
Well, I think, Peter, if I can just interject at that, if I can just interject briefly on that, Peter, I think that motorsport pretty much everywhere around the world, the marshals don't get paid. It's always volunteer enthusiasts that do marshalling. Isle
of Man, the TT event, and the marshals, which I withdrew my services because I do not think they're being looked after. Of course, they're doing it for the love of the sport, and I used to love helping the riders, etc., etc. But what did you get? Allegedly, again, I believe they get a bottle of water on a hot day, but that's peanuts. You can't even afford to give a person a cup of coffee.
All right, well, let's ask David Cretney what he thinks about that.
Okay, I'm very supportive of the Isle of Man TT Marshals. I think they have a central role, and the organisation, I think, has been meeting officials this morning. If it's not this morning, then it's tomorrow. And they've been meeting also with the Manx Motorcycle Club and other parties who'll be working with us and taking this forward. I'm a patron of the Isle of Man TT Marshals. I haven't given in my notice. I remain a marshal at Blaff Bridge, and I do so because I believe that by so doing, I'm playing a part in the greatest event on the Isle of Man and trying to make something successful for the Isle of Man. We get a programme, we get a bag of goodies. Yes, there could always be improvements in that, and hopefully we'll be able to do that in the time ahead.
All right, good stuff. I need to move on, Peter, but thank you very much for your call. Let's go to line 2 and see what Tommy makes of this. Hello, Tom.
Oh, hi, Stu. Hello there, David.
Hi, Tommy.
I'm just wondering, have you been up here lately, David? I live in Victoria Avenue now. Have you been up to walk around the facilities up here at the campsite and around the grandstand?
Not recently, no.
Oh, well, let me tell you, David, for the last 3 years as I moved up here, I've gone round with my dog, walking round. I love to meet all the bikers and
Yes.
all the fans. And without exception, every one of them has said the facilities up here are an absolute disgrace, David. You've got a shower block there that's 3 decades out of
Yes.
past its sell-by date. There's a chap there said to me, he was on crutches. He said, I've got to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to try to get in for the shower. And even when you get in, the showers are not draining properly, and they're standing in 4 or 5 inches of water. The machines for the washing and the drying, they're breaking down every single day. And there's a tarmac track here that trucks are expected to drive around. It's full of potholes, and nothing's been done about it for year after year, David.
All right, so some good questions there from Tommy.
Okay, what I would say is a number of the elements of infrastructure you talk about, Tommy, are actually owned by the corporation rather than by government. I think if we work with the corporation in the time ahead, then hopefully we'll be able to make more improvements. If you go to the top of the paddock, you'll see there's been significant improvements in terms of the riders and the teams there. But I accept completely what you're saying, that more could be done. I've certainly had feedback about the showers and things in the past.
All right, good stuff. Thank you for your call, Tommy. Let's have a look at some texts and emails. Now, one of the ways that this is going to save us money, I presume, is because there are going to be far fewer people on the public payroll in the Isle of Man looking after the TT or events around it. Is that the case? Are there 5 people at the moment?
The 5 people, yes. You said far fewer. Some people kind of think there's like 20 people or something. There's 5 people currently, and what will happen, subject to their agreement, is that 3 members of staff who are currently involved in the TT will transfer to this organisation, which is setting up its office in Douglas, and so they will no longer be on the government payroll.
All right, well, I've got a question here. Can David confirm that Paul Phillips is a director of this new firm? That from Andy.
No, he's not. He's certainly not.
But is that likely to happen? Because there's always a dismay, isn't there, if somebody goes from the public sector to the private sector as part of some sort of a sweetheart deal?
Well, he has deliberately been kept as apart from this, because it was always known that whoever was the successful tenderer would likely want Paul's talents alongside. I go back a long way with Paul. It was me who engaged Paul in the first place when it was quite clear that the event needed revitalising and the event needed to be modernised. He and the team around him have done a great job, and it was very much opposed at the time, his appointment, and he's done a great job. People are always, can I say it nicely, ultra cautious about these things. He will be going to the new organisation if he wishes to. Whether he becomes a director or not, I don't know.
Right.
I've got no information on that.
But that's not part of the deal.
It's certainly not part of the deal.
All right, and this is maybe a little bit below the belt, but let me throw it at you anyway.
Yeah.
Why should the public have any trust in your guest when he was involved in the signature deal that cost the public millions?
Well, I'm glad that that's been raised, because somebody anonymously on the forums keeps putting that. All the time they keep putting that, and they obviously don't know what they're talking about, because I didn't sign the signature deal. The signature deal was signed by the person who came after me as minister. I had not signed it.
No, but you must have been involved in the negotiations.
I was involved in discussions, but I didn't sign any deal, and I'm accused of costing the taxpayer £1.6 million by some anonymous plonker. and it's nonsense.
All right. Can Mr. Cretney assure us that this is not a waste of money like the Jacksons, and also what's the highly paid motorsport event team doing to earn their money now that this contract's been signed? Well, I think you've answered the second part of that, this from Cliffy. I mean, things like the Jacksons, I suppose some of these things work and some of them don't.
They do, and at the moment we're working with a promoter in terms of Tom Jones at the Nobles Park. Hopefully that'll be successful. It's been a great. There's number of people have taken tickets. The seated capacity had been sold out, so we've had to put on more seats. So yeah, I think if you don't take any risks in life, you don't do anything.
Yeah, you're right. That's Guy Martin's view on it, isn't it?
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
It's back to the drawing board for the government after its plans to transform the island's gateway route, Douglas Promenade, were scrapped. It was a grandiose £21 million makeover to upgrade the road and walkway, relocate the horse trams and create an entirely new streetscape. But an independent planning inspector recommends rejection of the scheme in its current form, and the Council of Ministers has done so with reluctance. The inspector highlighted safety concerns in putting trams on the walkway, but that hasn't been a stumbling block for the infrastructure department, whose own experts had no safety worries. The scheme has been in the pipeline since May 2015, May last year, and was launched as an exciting and innovative catalyst for the regeneration of Douglas. The revised vision is going to be more modest. The DOI will redraw plans to upgrade the road between the Sea Terminal and the War Memorial, with the rest of the modified scheme to follow. Are you a traditionalist? Would you like to see things stay pretty much as they are? Or do you think we're missing a great opportunity to do something maybe a bit more exciting? There's one of the wags on Manx forums has been posting for years and saying that the answer for the promenade scheme is a monorail and turn the old Summerland site into a felt museum. That's vision as far as I'm concerned. I think that'd be great. Felt museum. You could have a nap room and all sorts of things. Chester car park, difficult to use, too many concrete posts, narrow spaces. A quick way to deal with this is to repaint lines and make 2 spaces instead of 3. I'm sure it's worth a try, says Bob. Okay. Any idea what all the smoke over Port Erin is? Looks like a fire. Michael H. I don't know. If anybody knows, do get in touch. Delighted with the decision. Can't understand why it's so difficult to accommodate everything. It's there now. Give us a good road surface. Stop the trams at 5 to allow rush hour and coaches offloading at hotels. Also when the top roads close for racing, says Liz. Thank you, Liz. Horse trams kept with one track in the middle of the roadway with a couple of passing places and then get on with it as soon as possible. Simple, says Ray. Hi Stu, here we go again, throwing good money after bad. Dear Mr. Gorm, we've got no money, let alone 21 million to waste on the prom. Just resurface it and be done for 10 years. From Ian. Well, yeah, I think that was one of the suggestions that came up at the time of the £21 million scheme, that, you know, for a couple of million, I think it was, it could just be resurfaced. But it was only going to last a short period of time. It wasn't going to address the basic problem with the foundations of the promenade. But, you know, maybe in 10 years we'll have a few quid again and we can afford to dig the whole thing up or do it. You know, there might be new technology where they can just inject the road and make it safe. I don't know. I have to say, I do see a lot of sense in that suggestion. So the government wants an extra 15,000 new residents. That's, let's say, 30,000 more cars. Well, you can only drive one at once, can't you? The island is going to come to a standstill. I think we're a good way off that. And your maths is a bit suspect. Leave it as it is. Call me a fuddy-duddy. You fuddy-duddy, Phil. But the first thing that happens when you improve roads is that cars do 15 miles an hour faster. I don't think that you could physically do that along the promenade the way that the road is laid out. Even with the changes, I don't think it would speed the traffic up particularly. Although if they sort of change the phasing of the pedestrian crossings, move them around a wee bit, it would maybe get traffic moving when it tends to get gridlocked. Bob called, think this is all about the parking. There's plenty of space on Loch Prom for parking, a two-way roadway parking and the tramway alongside the pavement as was originally planned. There's enough space for everything now. Why is there not going to be enough space afterwards? It's because they want to cram in more parking that we don't need. Let's go to line 3. We've got Alistair on. Hello, Alistair.
Good morning, Stu. Yeah. This whole promenade thing concerns me quite a lot.
Right.
I've just read this report this morning, which is 90 pages.
I was going to say a weighty document.
Pardon?
It's a weighty document, isn't it?
Yes, it is. But it's very, very damning in parts. The inspector really, and I went to that inquiry for one day, and I could see how the inspector was thinking. He had a very big issue on health and safety on this promenade.
Yeah.
And what concerns me is not what we've got now, because what we've got now is the right decision, but it's stage 2 of this that concerns me, because they're still talking about the horse trams, which, fair enough, people like the horse trams one, but the very first thing I think that we have to do here is that we have to go to health and safety first before they do anything, to see if horse trams would be acceptable.
Yes.
From down to, from the Villa Marina colonnade. That should be the very first thing they do before they start planning for stage 2.
So you think they've been putting the cart ahead of the horse, really, in terms of...
I do, yes,
Yeah,
because the horse trams have been the problem with this promenade right from day one.
Yeah.
And again, you're absolutely right. It's a cart in front of the horse. So I'm concerned that stage 2, we don't go through the same procedures. And the other thing I'm concerned about is, are we going to employ the same consultants and the same people as what we've had that have produced failure? Are we going to get rid of them and get new consultants? I think that's very important.
Yeah, good point. All right, thank you for that, Alistair. Some good points there. If you've got a point on this, then share it with us. I think somebody sent something in about the consultants. Just a thought, Stuart, having worked in development for 30 years, could the department go back to the consultants that came up with a scheme for the promenade, which is found to be so fundamentally flawed, and get the taxpayers' money back? That question came in earlier from Malcolm, which kind of ties in with what Alistair was just saying. I don't suppose you can. I expect you get consultants in. You've got all sorts of successes with other urban planning matters around the UK or whatever, and they come up with proposals, and that's all they are. Now, and the trouble with all this is that it seems to be all based on opinion. I'm sure that the original plans were legal, but it seems now that the independent planning inspector has got all sorts of reservations about them, so the whole thing's been thrown out. I don't know if you could get your money back or not. I expect that the original planners came up with this and said, well, this is what we do. Do it or not, it's entirely up to you. Difficult. It would be nice if we could get our money back when these things don't work out, but I don't suppose we will. Stu, delighted that we've won about the promenade. Use some of the 21 million for a new car park on the awful town square. Get rid of the parked cars on the seaside of the prom. They spoil our magnificent Victorian prom, and keep our horse trams. Give Murray Lambden a medal for all his good work, says Ruth. I don't think the town square is... I think it's privately owned, so I don't know that you can do anything with it. Whatever they come up with, moaners will always moan. It'll never be right for them. And where are these 300-plus parking spaces? I've just done 3 laps of town and there's nowhere to park. I have a van, so I can't get in car park, says Gary. Good point, Gary. Have I missed something? I thought the horse tram service had been suspended indefinitely by Douglas Corpy, so why all the fuss about where to put the tracks? Well, yes, that was the case a few weeks ago, that the horse trams were... they decided that the Corpy wasn't going to do anything with them anymore. And government said that they didn't want them, so we thought that the horse trams were being retired. Then there was a move to keep them going for this year while they made up a long-term plan. And I think the long-term plan is that the horse trams are going to stay. The former Chief Minister says Castletown's MHK and Board of Commissioners should have fought harder to maintain the tradition of swearing in the new Lieutenant Governor at Castle Rushen. Sir Richard Gosney will be sworn in at Douglas Courthouse, breaking a tradition dating back centuries because Castle Rushen's courtroom apparently isn't in a suitable state to be used. Tony Brown says he feels so strongly about the issue he's broken his 4-year silence after retiring from politics to write to the town's current MHK, Richard Ronan, expressing his dismay. What do we think about that? Does it really matter in the great scheme of things, or is it completely unimportant? Do we go along with tradition? We're talking about the horse trams a number of times recently, and people constantly saying, well, it's tradition, it's part of our heritage. Surely Castle Rushen is, and the swearing in of a new Lieutenant Governor is more important than that in terms of heritage, isn't it? Maybe I'm wrong, I don't know. Some interesting comments in. This one from John. He says there's an unspoken agenda of diminishing the role of the Governor, creating the illusion of greater independence. I hadn't thought about that. I wonder if that's something to do with it. It's a very good suggestion. Stuart, why are we obsessed with all things modern? We trumpet from the rooftops that we have the oldest parliament and then say that we can't maintain tradition by swearing in servants in appropriate places. What if it was said that Westminster Abbey was no good for state occasions, so we'll move it to the local registry office? Hear, hear, Mr. Brown, says Jan. Well, yeah. And the fact is, if the room isn't particularly suitable, if it's a bit run down or whatever, as Tony Brown said, hold it outside, hold it outdoors and put a marquee, just a sort of a tent roof thing up like they do at Tynwald Hill every year and do it there. It seems like a good idea to me. Let's go to the lines and see what Jill makes of this. Hello, Jill.
Hi, Stu. To my mind, it is on a par with the UK government saying, well, when Prince Charles becomes king, we're not going to have the coronation in Westminster Abbey. We'll have it at the Old Bailey.
Yeah, worse than that, actually. At least the Old Bailey's a sort of a proud old building.
I know, but I mean, I couldn't think of any buildings that people might have heard of.
Yeah. The London Eye. What's that big round thing called?
Yes.
Big Catherine wheel. Yeah. Well, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, somebody's just made a very similar suggestion about it. If there is an occasion for pomp and circumstance, I mean, we've got Tynwald Day every year, of course, where the great and the good all put on the posh frocks and stand on the hill. But the other one is every 5 years or however often we sign up a new lieutenant governor, and you would have thought that was a perfect opportunity to do all the full traditional bit, wouldn't you?
And the thing is, what have they been doing all winter at the castle? It's been closed, so isn't that a time for maintenance?
Yeah, you'd have thought, wouldn't you? Yeah. Yeah, good. All right. Thank you very much for your comments, Jill. I think we're in agreement. And let's go to line 3 and see what Eddie makes of it. Hello, Eddie.
Hey, Stu, all right?
Yeah.
Wonderful place, Castletown, isn't it? The castle and everything.
Lovely.
I'm totally in agreement with Tony Brown.
Yes.
The rooms which they need have all got stone walls which are pointed, right? So maintenance is more or less nil.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just the decor things like some of the, what do they call them, tapestries and things that
yes.
put up there. Well, but the more important is it is a thing for Castletown. If you lose it, it's gone.
Yeah.
They've just spent how many millions on the square itself, which I believe is a disaster. You've got blind people walking into seats and things like this. We're going to end up with claims and claims and claims, I think. We need the people here, right? That's what we need. It's a bit like Douglas. If they're going to spend all this money on Douglas Promenade and everything, we need the people coming here first.
Yes.
That's something that follows.
Well, I don't know if you've got it the right way around. People would say, well, people are not going to come because it's so run down, so we need to spend the money first.
I've been in the square a few times since it's been finished.
Yeah.
There is no increase in people whatsoever. There's a decrease in parking, which people are moaning about, and blind people are walking into solid stone seats and putting claims in. Right, we're going to end up with an absolutely silly situation, but the main point is we've got a castle there that could have filled that square up one day.
Right.
With that ceremony.
Well, I'm just thinking back. I mean, it's a million years ago, but when Prince Charles was invested as the Prince of Wales, that was at Carnarvon Castle, I think.
Yes, it was.
And I think that's probably a lot more run down generally, isn't it? More of a ruin, I would have thought, than Castle Rushen.
I'm not totally, I mean, when you come to traditional things, I mean, all this wearing wigs at Tynwald and everything, if it doesn't cost anything, there's no problem.
Yeah.
A lot of people are against it. But this is a traditional thing where the castle is used.
Right.
If they're not careful, Dandara will put a bid in for it.
The Castle Rushen Apartments, yeah.
Exactly.
Yep. All right. Good thought, Eddie. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much for downloading this week's edition of the Talking Heads podcast. The show is broadcast live on Manx Radio AM and FM on weekdays between 12 and 2. You can get a daily preview of each show on the Talking Heads page on manxradio.com, powered by Millie Chaps of Ramsey, or by following Stu Manx on Twitter. You can also find out more about the show on our Facebook page. Talking Heads is produced in association with manxmultimedia.com.